Hello, hello, this is the Dyslexic Cosplayer, and I'm here to give you the next update video for my Luther for DragonCon build. Yeah, it has been a bit of a learning experience, so I hope to be able to show you some of the progress we've made and talk about where we're going from here. Alright, let's get into it. So, I decided to add a little bit of detail work to the head crest, so I got some triangular foam dowels and proceeded to cut them out to frame it with and then add a little tongue down the middle to help raise it up. You'll see why that's important later. Afterwards, I painted it with some black Plastidip and then added a layer of Rust-Oleum hammered metal paint over it to give it the general look I was going for, but there's still a few more details to add. I tried adding some iridescent paint to hopefully give it a more shifting shadows effect. Unfortunately, it did not quite work as I had intended. It either needed more coats or was just not quite cutting the mustard. So I decided to give up on that and move on to the next thing I knew I definitely wanted to do. So I took a fine tip brush and decided to fill in some of the lines I had added to the face with black paint in the recesses to help highlight them and draw more attention to those aspects of the helmet. I thought it gave it a closer look to the actual design that I was given by the author, Chamois Stovall. So once that was done, I got some purple fake fur off of the internet and I cut it with a box cutter from the back. I highly recommend this as an alternative to using scissors, as you'll get way less shedding otherwise. After I had cut a strip about the right width and length, I added it to the top of the head crest to provide the shifting purple shadows or maybe fur aesthetic that I was going for. Plus it gives the helmet a little bit of extra color, since I don't want it to be just black and silver, but to have a little bit more life to it. Plus I'm hoping to use more of the same fabric to do a fur collar around the neck, which should hopefully add to that whole shifting shadows flame thing. We'll see what it looks like when we get there. Then once that was done, it was time to hit it with the airbrush, which is definitely one of my newer skills that I'm learning, but I think really helped bring out some of what I was looking for. Adding some depth in the places where there normally should be bright silver to help highlight the edges while giving it a sense of darkness and obviously depth. And so yeah, the helmet paint job is pretty much done. Time to work on the horns some more. So at this point, I should talk about some of the things that I'm learning on this project. Like, if you're gonna mix two-part resin, do not eyeball your measurements. As a result, I ended up getting the first mold completely full of half-dried resin that never seemed to quite cure properly. So even if I could remove it, wasn't quite sure what results I was going to get, and yeah, it was generally just a mess. So I took a step back, took a breath, and decided to start over from scratch and remake another mold with a prototype I had made that was a bit larger, since I had found in the aftermath I kinda like bigger horns on it rather than the more moderately sized ones that I had originally made molds for. I will say I'm glad I tried this technique out, but as you can see, even with the video running at 2x speed, it still takes a while to get the mold off, and this one came off fairly easily. My first attempts, oh boy, probably took almost twice as long, and there was a lot more screaming and being frustrated involved, I can tell you. But now I have a silicone mold to do my resin with. And just for fun, I decided to lay out the previous horns that I had made to compare and see how the sizes were different, just so you can get a sense of how prototyping can be an arduous process. So after that, it was time to make the new horns. Once I got the mold sorted out, I decided to pour out my resins, this time being much more careful to make sure that I had them in equal measurements. And I think the general result, once it finished curing after about 24 hours, was pretty spectacular. Here, take a look. Obviously, the gray one was the prototype I made just to show off what it should hopefully look like once it's all finished. But yeah, I think the Midnight Sky effect is pretty close to being ready. I've got a little bit more stuff I want to do to it before it'll be truly done, but I'm feeling really confident at this point. The helmet's coming together nicely. So, since it was coming together so nicely, I decided to start in on doing the sword. To do the sword, I found a file for a sword design I kind of like the blade of on the Facebook group Pepakura Library. Afterwards, I downloaded the file free off the library and went to the computer program Pepakura, which allowed me to size and scale it and then convert that 3D image to a two-dimensional template that I could then print out and put on paper to make templates to cut out of the EVA foam. For the spine of the sword, I decided to use a length of PVC pipe I had laying around. I then hit it with a heat gun and heated it up in sections and then flattened it out to try and help make it into a better blade design. Once that was done, I cut the sections of EVA foam out and applied contact cement to them so that I could hopefully glue them all together. This was very long and incredibly tedious. And unfortunately, once I glued everything together, I found there was a lot more warping than I wanted to see in the blade. Also, it was so much wider than I had intended. It felt more like an anime sword, which is absolutely not what I want to have it look like in the end. So, just to be very clear, every costume has a certain amount of trial and error, at least in my experience, but that does not mean I'm discouraged with moving forward. In fact, I'm kind of excited. I decided for what I want to do to fix the sword problem is I'm just going to 3D print the blade, which does have the other added advantage of I should be able to pose with it with the tip pressed into the ground without having to worry about it distressing or damaging the foam, which is a common problem with making just strictly foam weapons. Pointy bits are a little hard to do with the foam without it warping or distorting over time once pressure's been applied to it. So I'm going to 3D print the blade and then make the sword itself with a hilt out of foam in the near future. Plus, I'm very excited because I'm going to try and design some stuff using Blender for the first time, hopefully fairly quickly, to do with the sword so I can add some nice little details, since in the book all the arcanists that have arcane familiars are described as having a tattoo on their forehead of a 7-pointed star and a symbol that represents their arcane familiar. In this case, the wonderful Shammy Stovall was very kind to give me a reference image of what that should look like for Luthair's arcanist. So I'm going to try and mimic that design as a little plate that I can put in the center of the crossguard on the sword to help tie that into the costume, since obviously you're not going to see my forehead with the helmet on kind of thing. I am also in the process of buckling down and working on the wings. I finally broke down, did a Google search, and actually found a design for how to make your own off of Etsy. So I'm not flying completely blind anymore and should be making some progress on that in the future couple of weeks. But more short-term projects are definitely going to be trying to get the sword finished, working on some of the other bits of the armor like the gloves and stuff, and slowly trying to get like maybe the torso done in the near future. I've also got a really cool, exciting announcement I'm saving for next week. Fingers crossed. I'll hopefully have that for you in our next update video. Until then, thank you all again for your ongoing support, and this project is far from being finished, but I am not deterred, I am still excited, and there will hopefully be more regular update videos soon to come. Until next time, friends, family, and patrons, sign-offs are hard. Thank you once again to all my friends, family, sponsors, and patrons, new and old.